What else does the operating system do for us? Well, it acts as an interface to application software, meaning the programs that we use every day. You know, things like the web browser, word processor, games, whatever we're running on our computer. Those are things that the operating system supports, and those different applications are written for a particular operating system. So like for example, right now I'm running Linux. The programs I'm running now are not necessarily ones I could just take and put on Windows. They wouldn't work. Or Windows programs won't necessarily work on Linux. They're two different types of operating systems. So the programs have to be written for the operating system. Same thing with Apple. They have their own sets of programs. Actually, the latest versions of Apple's operating systems, OS X, have a lot more in common with Linux than they do with, and a lot of programs that run in Linux will run in Apple, because they're actually both based on Unix operating system. So they're kind of a different world that are somewhat compatible. So application programs rely on the operating system to communicate with the computer, and that's that layered approach to isolating things. Drivers are programs that interface to hardware. They allow the operating system to communicate with hardware. Now I'm talking about hardware that may be more than just the basic hardware. The BIOS, in effect, acts like a driver too, and it communicates with the keyboard, the mouse, the basic video modes, the hard drive. But there's a lot of other hardware that might be that BIOS doesn't know how to deal with. For example, the sound system. You might have built-in sound in your motherboard, or you might have a sound card. They have a driver for that runs that hardware, so that it knows how the operating system knows how to deal with that hardware. Or let's say you have a printer. Every printer has a driver that makes that printer work with the operating system, because the operating system can't possibly know about all the possible drivers out there. Although Windows does include a lot of drivers. It has what's called a cabinet file, and a cabinet file is a compressed database and it stores a whole bunch of different files inside of it. And there's a lot of drivers built into Windows that are stored in there. But if you buy any new printer nowadays that's been out for not very long, most likely Windows won't know how to use it, so you have to get a driver for it. It usually comes with your printer. Or a scanner. A scanner would be another device that needs a driver to be able to function. You can tell that a program is a driver because it'll usually have the extension .drv. In the old MS-DOS Microsoft Disk Operating System, they had drivers and they had .sys as the extension. What do I mean by the extension? Well, that is part of the name, right? The name for the program. The name includes a 3-letter extension. Software patches. Operating system has the capability of upgrading itself. And this is true of Windows, Apple, and Linux. They all have this capability of patching themselves, which is a good thing. It used to be, in the old days of the operating system, that you just had to get a whole new operating system when they found a bug in it. So you had to reload the whole thing, which wasn't a big deal in those days because the operating system wasn't very big. Nowadays, as we'll see in our lab, it can take an hour to load an operating system. So you don't want to have to reload everything just because they found a little bug. So nowadays, Windows and so forth have the capability of patching, fixing little parts of itself, not having to reload everything. Same thing for the application programs. They don't have to be completely reloaded necessarily. They can often be upgraded by patching or fixing just part of it. And that's because today's software and operating systems are somewhat modular. They're broken up into pieces, and the different pieces can be changed in and out. Much like the parts on your car. You know, when something goes wrong with your car, you don't have to buy a whole new car. You go down and maybe need a new muffler or something. You don't have to get a new car because you have a hole in your muffler, or a new tire. It's modular, sort of. Let me ask you a question. Can you describe 3 functions of an operating system? What are 3 things an operating system can do for us?
They communicate with the BIOS.
Yeah, it can communicate with the hardware. Right? That's a big thing an operating system does for us. What else can it do for us? It can, yeah, he said that. What else does it do?
File system.
File system. That's a big one, right? A file system is part of the operating system. It deals with all the files and folders, so forth, that are stored on the hard drive. Anything else? The user, right? The user interface. It provides a friendly way to communicate with your computer, or more or less friendly, we hope. So those are the main things. And another thing it does is it lets multiple programs run simultaneously. In modern operating systems, we can have those different programs running without interfering with each other. That didn't used to be the case. In early versions of the operating system, like DOS, you could only have one program running at a time. And if you tried to do 2 programs running at the same time, there was a way to do that. It was called a TSR, or terminate and stay resident. You had to make sure those programs didn't go out of bounds, that they didn't write something into the other program's memory. If they did, they could crash, and that often did happen. The blank is the core of an operating system. The kernel, right. The kernel is like the boss. Like the colonel in the army or whatever. The blank provides communication between application software and the BIOS. Yeah, the operating system is the go-between between application programs and the BIOS and the hardware, sometimes directly, because the BIOS doesn't understand how to deal with everything. A blank is used in an operating system to keep track of file locations on a disk. What do you call the part of the operating system that keeps track of all this stuff? Yeah, file allocation table, or FAT. Sometimes called a FAT. Well, it's just the name of one type, but what is software that enables proper communication between the PC and the peripherals, or between the operating system and the peripherals? Right. Drivers. Drivers are programs that interface to hardware.